Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we'll have the latest from the live radar. Run for the latest weather warnings as we still have a yellow thunderstorm warning issued in the east through to this evening, as we still have quite a lot of activity out there across the east, actually quite a bit more than we initially anticipated, and it has given some really quite torrential rain and some flash flooding in places alongside the usual storm hazards. We'll look at the latest UKV, looking at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. It will remain a little bit variable over the next few days, but still reasonably cool with a westerly flow. Before, as we head into the middle of the week, things are going to be turning much hotter as we head through Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, as we start to see the next heat wave arriving. Now, we'll be able to look at that in detail on the longer range charts. It's really that 10th to 20th of July point is where we're really looking at some pretty intense heat. And the big thing about this is, yes, it's probably going to be as hot, maybe slightly hotter, maybe slightly cooler than the conditions we saw earlier this week, where we saw it peaking around 34 degrees. It's going to be around that range. I don't think we're going to see the 40 degree that was rumoured within some of the runs a few days ago. I think that's quite unlikely, at least for that 10th to 20th of July point, but low to mid 30s looks pretty likely. But the big thing about this is going to be really quite widespread, not just the south and the east, but it's going to be further northwards as well, and it could last a good number of days, not just 2 or 3, maybe 4, 5, 6, even some runs getting that intense heat, 30 plus degrees, lasting for over 7 days. So some real proper summery conditions coming. So if you don't enjoy that heat, then do cherish the next few days. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, which do like and subscribe. And if you start on the live radar, you can see the activity we've got out in the east at the moment. The storms are starting to fade away as I'm recording this around 4 p.m. and starting to clear out into the Channel and the North Sea, but still a lot of activity across the far southeast. This wasn't originally included within the weather warning yesterday, but it has now been included as that warning has been extended, and still a few storms in the original warning area across the East Anglia, but really been very active through this afternoon. Even where I am across North London, we've seen some really heavy rain, torrential stuff, flash flooding in some spots. And yeah, been a bit of a surprise, to be honest. We knew there'd be some heavy showers and storms, but I thought it'd be more exclusively across East Anglia, but that risk has been quite a lot higher than initially anticipated, with that warning being extended this morning, and you see activity is even more extensive than that. If you look at the temperatures, it's not been a terribly warm day with those storms in the east. Best temperatures are actually across parts of western and southwestern England, where we're up towards the low 20s, but most are hovering around the high teens, or maybe only just touching 20 degrees. So average to maybe slightly below average. But to be honest, it's not too bad. I don't mind these sort of temperatures personally. Now, do look at the past 24-hour precipitation. You'll be able to see the ridiculous amounts of rainfall that has fallen in some spots. You see where these darker greens have cleared through. We've had some really intense rain with some thunderstorm cells clearing through. And again, this is not picking up on all the rainfall, as this is only getting radar estimates. Some areas seeing some heavy rain that doesn't get picked up on radar. So, yeah, really high activity, at least compared to what we had expected yesterday, and we're looking at likely to continue over the next couple of hours. We see out from the latest weather warning, which has been extended to cover London and the far southeast. It was extended last night around 8 p.m. after we had recorded our video, so a bit unfortunate that wasn't included yesterday, but was extended to cover more of southern and eastern England. Again, most of the biggest storms have now cleared through, but still a few, especially across Kent and Sussex, Surrey kind of area, which could still produce a few tens of millimetres. But no warnings now expected for the next few days, as things do quieten down before the big heat returns. Now, you can see those storms clearing through this morning and afternoon, should clear away overnight. There could be a bit more in the way of some heavier rain, persistent rain overnight, but it shouldn't be too heavy. You don't see any reds within that. So fingers crossed it's not too severe. But if we go by the last couple of days where the radar or the UKV has underdone the storms, like it has underdone them today, especially sort of 1 or 2 days notice, then there could be a little more activity around this evening. Into Monday, though, you can see it's pretty dry and pretty sunny, so pretty pleasant overall. And the same can be said into Tuesday, where it doesn't look too bad at all. Wednesday, still similar conditions, but we're starting to see a shift at the upper air level. They don't really see on the sort of precipitation charts here, but the wind direction is starting to shift to a southerly, and that's really shown there on Thursday, where temperatures really start to climb up, and they'll continue to climb into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We could start to reach that low 30-degree mark. You see the upper air temperatures are not too warm through Monday and Tuesday, but then you can see as we head into Wednesday and into Thursday, they start to get into the double digits and eventually into the low teens as that wind direction starts to move up from the south. It's pretty light southerly wind, at least initially, and that's why those temperatures are only climbing up very slowly, a couple of degrees a day. But by the weekend, we'd expect to be in the mid to maybe high teens at 850 HPA, and that would produce low 30s. Now, to look at the 2 meter temperatures, see this afternoon really struggling to get much above 18 or 19 degrees. So a pretty cool early July day. But as I said, it's actually not been too bad. Still with some sunshine around. We've avoided those showers. It's not been too horrible at all. Into Monday with more dry conditions, more temperatures, or more areas will reach temperatures at around 20 plus degrees. And the same could be said for Tuesday, where it could get even warmer, 23 to maybe 25 degrees at the top temperature. So hovering back towards average, maybe nudging above average. Wednesday, starting to climb up a little bit further, 25, 27. You can already see the theme appearing here. We're jumping up by a couple of degrees per day until we reach the peak through the weekend. And then you see into Thursday, temperatures starting to climb up even further, 28 to 30 degrees. Expect to be maybe 31, 32 on Friday, and then maybe the sort of 33 to 35 into the weekend. But again, it does all depend on exactly how high the peak of those upper air temperatures will be. Now, if you head over to the latest GFS now, you see a bit of a northerly flow at the moment, with low pressure around. That's why it's pretty unsettled, especially in the east, and it's pretty cool as well. Some pretty fresh air around at the moment. But high pressure is going to nudge back in over the next 24 hours or so, and you see it turns drier and eventually hotter as we head into the middle to end of this week. High pressure involved, and look at those upper air temperatures by next weekend into the mid-teens, the 15-degree isosphere moving in. One thing you'll notice though, it's not just touching southern England, it's getting all the way up towards Scotland, and that's the big thing about this heat wave that is going to be arriving. It is pretty extensive and long-lasting. That 15-degree isosphere goes nowhere all the way through to the mid-teens of July, and maybe even the 20-degree isosphere could flirt with us. Mid-30s, upper 30s territory there. Eventually, as we progress towards kind of the 17th, 18th of July, we do start to see some fresher air moving in, and it does set the scene for potentially a bit more of a thundery pattern there towards the 20th of July. But between, as I said, around the 9th, 10th of July, all the way out towards the 17th, 18th, we are looking at hot heat wave level conditions. 30 plus degrees would be the top temperature on the majority of these days. And if we do zoom in and have a look at those top temperatures, you can see Friday, which is just outside of the UKV range there, 32, 33 degrees. Into next Saturday, we're looking at again 32, 33. Next Sunday, potentially again 30 to 31. And as again, notice 28 degrees there across Scotland. So very hot, even that far northwards into the 14th. Again, looking at 33, 34 into the 15th, just as hot, maybe even hotter. More 34s appearing there. And then as we head into the 16th, as that heat starts to peak, quite a widespread area of 30 to 34 across England there. And finally into the 17th, you can see the far east could get back up to 30 degrees maybe, but starting to wear off further westward. So you can see there about 7 days of consecutive 30 plus degrees. Fortunately, not seeing anything into the upper 30s at this stage, mostly 30 to 35 degrees, but nonetheless, that is very oppressive. Day on day, it is going to make it very difficult to sleep. And of course, anything else, any infrastructure is going to be impacted as well. It's not just a couple of days of 34 degrees like we saw at the start of this week, where it's 34 degrees for about 2-3 days, depending on where you are. 6 or 7 days could be pretty relentless and pretty oppressive. Now, if you compare to the GM, it's probably very similar. High pressure building in. You can see that southerly wind arriving by the middle of the week. And again, if we put on the upper air temperatures, 15 degrees firm moving in, potentially even higher there for a time, for eventually it does get pushed away. However, GFS does it around the 17th. The GM does this around the 15th, maybe 16th. So a couple of days earlier, and around day 10, we've already got low pressure nudging back in. So GM is as hot, at least initially as hot, but it does lose its intensity a little bit quicker. You can see here next Friday, 31 degree peak. As we head into next Saturday, similar temperatures up towards the 30 degree mark once again. Next Sunday, in towards the low 30s. Next Monday, again, could hit 30 degrees in the east. But already by the 15th, cooling down a little bit more towards the mid-20s. The 16th would be a little bit cooler as well. So still reaching those low 30s, maybe only for 3 or 4 days, not the 7 days like the GFS. So you can still see there are discrepancies between the runs, but they do agree a heat wave is coming. It's just the longevity and the exact intensity, as ever, in these sort of patterns. And finally, if we compare to the latest ECMWF, again, high pressure building in through the week, southerly winds arriving, and again, if we put on the upper air temperatures, 15 degree isotherm arriving by next weekend, again, from the far south coast all the way towards eastern Scotland, looking very hot. And you can see it lasts all the way through to the 14th, 15th here. And it doesn't go anywhere, really, until similar to the GFS around the 17th, 18th before getting swept away. But even then, it happens quite slowly. So Eastern OF even more relentless. And I suspect it could be even hotter when we look at those 2 meter temperatures. Again, if we move into Thursday afternoon, we are looking again at 28, 29, maybe 30 degrees. Of course, UKV has an isolated 30 there across southern England into the 11th. Temperatures even higher, 31 across parts of the southeast. Into the 12th, could be even hotter, around the 32 degree mark. Of course, we can only look at 6-hour increments at this stage. So this is 6 p.m, 31 degrees, could peak higher earlier on in the afternoon. 13th, again, looking at 30 degrees. The 14th, 32 degrees. Into the 15th, again, 32, maybe 33. Into the 16th as well, looking at 30. And again, it's not just England, it's Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. Yes, western areas will cool off faster, inevitably being closer to the Atlantic flow, but it is going to be hot there as well. And then you can see into the 17th, slowly that heat starting to dissipate away from the west. So all 3 rain runs have a heat wave coming up later on this working week. Yes, bit of a mix on the longevity between maybe 3 days up to 7 days in places. And of course, intensity still a little uncertain as well. ECMWF, GM looking at maybe 31 to 33, GFS pushing it more to maybe 35, 36. And again, we have to factor in high resolution runs, microclimate conditions that always push the temperatures up maybe a degree or 2. So I wouldn't be surprised to see an isolated 36, 37 in that GFS heat wave, for example. Now, if you finish by looking at the latest ensembles, variable over the next couple of days with quite a lot of rain, as we saw from those storms this afternoon, and perhaps a bit of rain overnight. But by around Wednesday, temperatures are on the up, and you just see it's a constant upwards trend into next weekend, where we are widely around the mid-teens at 850 HPA, which is 30 plus degree territory. There's still a few get towards the 20 degree isotherm, which is high 30s territory. That's 35 up to maybe 40 degrees in the right conditions. Still a few getting there, but most around the 15 degree mark, or anywhere between kind of 13 and 17 degrees, which is hovering around the high 20s into the low 30s, widely, locally, slightly hotter. So in line with what the operational runs. You can see the operational GFS is fairly in line with its ensembles as well. Only a little caveat there is around the 15th to 16th with the breakdown of the heat. How quickly does it occur? Operational run, as we saw, drags it out towards the 17th, 18th. Other runs, similar to the GM, probably taking it down around the 16th, 15th maybe. So we'll have to wait and see there, but regardless, majority of runs still keep us above average there, even towards the latter part of July, sort of confirming that yes, there could be a small breakdown, a small lull in the heat, but generally speaking, it's looking pretty warm, if not hot, for the rest of the month, perhaps. 2 meter temperatures in line with what we saw from the operational runs, touching 30 degrees most days. And again, we're looking at the midday and 6 p.m. predictions here. 3 p.m. would be a couple of degrees hotter. So, of course, we are, as said, looking at low to maybe mid-30s in London. And finally, if we compare to the ECM WF ensembles, cool over the next few days. 10th of July, so Wednesday, Thursday time, that's where we cross towards warm conditions once again, and then you see a big peak in those upper air temperatures later on into the weekend and start of the following week for a bit of a drop off. But again, that's where we've got that uncertainty as we picked up on the GFS ensembles. So big heat wave coming for all. That is the big kind of headliner message, is that yes, it's going to be similar temperatures, maybe slightly higher in a few spots for that heat wave coming up compared to what we saw earlier this week, about a week ago now, to be honest. But the big thing, I think, is going to be how widespread this heat wave is. It's not just intense across the east or the far southeast, as we saw from the GFS. Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, Republic of Ireland, all could see temperatures exceeding their respective heat wave thresholds. And for most of those areas, it's 25 degrees plus. So I'm thinking those sort of temperatures are looking very, very plausible later on this working week. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure to stay safe out there, of course. Still some thunderstorms at the moment, but of course that intense heat coming on for many later on this week. So do enjoy the cooler conditions the next kind of 2 or 3 days. Do cherish that. And of course, do make sure you take any necessary precautions for that heat that is coming. As I said, it's not going to be quite as hot as we anticipated maybe a few days ago. We were looking at high 30s, maybe even 40 degrees. From some of the runs, has backed off a couple of degrees from that, but regardless, it's very intense and it is very persistent, and that could be the troubling issue. Not just 2 or 3 days of 34 degrees, could be 6 or 7, as we said. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.